Hello everyone. I'm going to be out of school for a few days, so I figured I'd do a recording talking about the chapter 4. It is one of the most intense chapters and one of the longest chapters you'll see in this textbook, because understanding supply and demand is critical to a true understanding of economics, either micro or macro. So let's get started. During this chapter, we're going to look to answer these questions. What factors affect buyers' demand for goods? Factors that affect sellers? How do supply and demand determine price and quantities sold? How do change in the factors that affect demand and supply affect the market prices? And how do markets allocate resources? First thing we have to do is define a market. In a market, it is defined by a group of buyers and a group of sellers. If we have a single buyer or a single seller, it's difficult to work, as we would see in a monopoly. We can look at the buyers as a group, determined based on their demand for the product, and the sellers as a group as individuals selling or willing to supply the product to the marketplace. They're going to be competitive, very similar to what we see in a perfectly competitive marketplace. They can sell highly similar and substitutable products, or they could be selling the same products. The buyers and sellers are numerous. In effect, they don't believe that they have much power to change the price. As if you see in Johnson County and other counties around the country, we have multiple gas stations at the same intersection. And if you look at their signs, they're all charging the same price, because they don't believe they have the ability to raise their price without losing customers. So they're going to follow the leader in that example. Now the demand is a downward slope curve, and that makes sense because the lower the price, the more we as consumers are willing to buy. And if the price goes up, based on the law of demand, we're not willing to buy as many products. Here they show a demand schedule for Sam and lattes. And based on the price of lattes, Sam is going to tell us how many of the lattes he would consume. If the price was 0, Sam would consume 16 lattes. Whereas if the price was 3, he would consume 10, and at 6 he would consume 4. Now we can make a graphical representation of this curve. As we said before, it's going to be a downward sloping curve. We can identify each point along the demand curve. We can see it's downward sloping, and Sam can consume it anywhere, any point along this curve or within this curve. Now we can have market demand, and that means somebody other than Sam is participating in the marketplace. All we do is we add up the demand at each price interval, and that will establish the market quantity of demand. In this case, you have Sam, Q of D, quantity demanded, plus Dean's Q of D, which is quantity demanded, and they add them together and they give us the market quantity of demand. So at $0, the market demand is going to be 24 units. And at $6, the market quantity demand will be 6. We can see it represented graphically on this page. It's just plotting the points. There's our market Q of D, 24 at 0, 21 at 1, 18 at 2, 15 at 3, 12 at 4, 9 at 5, and 6 at 6. The demand curve has shifters or determinants that affect how you will consume the products. And if you would desire to consume more or less. Some can be non-price, and we're going to look at those as well. The first one is the number of buyers. If there's an increase in the number of buyers, there'll be an increase in the quantity demanded. A shift in the curve will move to the right. Remember, it doesn't matter if it's supply or demand. If there's an increase, the curve moves to the right. If a decrease, it moves to the left. And if there's a decrease in buyers, the D will move to the left. But you have to understand with buyers, that does not mean the entire population. There's two things you must have as a buyer. You must have desire and capacity. You may have the desire to own a Rolls Royce, but if you don't have the capacity, you are not a buyer. You may have the money to buy a Rolls Royce, but you'd rather buy something else. That means you have the capacity, but you don't have the desire. In either case, you're not a buyer, and they would understand that. Here they're showing us how the curve would move. If there's suppose the number of buyers increases, then we'll see an increase in the demand for the product. You can see the shift to the right. That's an increase in demand. So now instead of wanting 24, we want 29 at 0. Income. We have two types of goods. We have normal and inferior goods. With normal goods, well, to determine if they're normal or inferior, we have to ask each consumer a question about how they would behave if their income went up or down with each product. Let's say ribeye steaks. If your income goes up and you desire to buy more ribeye steaks, it is a normal good. If your income goes down and you decide to buy less ribeye steaks, it is a normal good. A normal good, price and the demand curve move together. If the income goes up, the demand goes up. If the income goes down, the demand goes down. The inferior good has an inverse relationship. Oodles of noodles is a good example. If your income goes up, will you buy more or less oodles of noodles? 99.9% of the population is going to say less. The remaining 1/10 of 1% will say no. They can still consume. So this curve is considered inferior because if the income goes up and everybody's buying less oodles and noodles, it is an inferior good. Now, if their income goes down, they may be willing to buy additional goods. Price-related goods. The two products are substitutes. They give the example of pizza and hamburgers. If the price of pizza goes up, you may choose another item, such as a hamburger. But they have to be true substitutes. Let's say Coke and Pepsi. If the price of Coke goes up, you're going to buy more Pepsi. If the price of Pepsi goes up, you're going to buy more Coke. So if the price of your product goes up, the demand for the other product is going to go up as well. If the price of your product goes down, the demand for your other competitor's product will go down as well. So they're positively related between your price and the demand for their goods, or vice versa. Price-related goods complements. These are things that belong together. Peanut butter and jelly. Tuition and textbooks. Bagels and cream cheese, eggs and bacon. Hot dogs and chili. We can go all day long talking about what are complements. Coffee and creamer. If I know the price of coffee is going up, my demand for creamer is going to go down because it's a complementary item. If the price of coffee goes up, I have to save some money somewhere else. It'll probably be on the creamer. Taste. This is kind of a catch-all Because a lot of times I can place it somewhere else. Let's say in North Carolina, in Johnson County, if you ask for tea, you get sweet tea. Go up north, you'll get unsweetened tea or hot tea. It's just taste. And as more individuals from up north migrate down, you'll see a change in taste in North Carolina, in Johnson County, and Wake County, etc. We can look at barbecue. In Johnson County, you're talking pork with a vinegar sauce. Go to eastern North Carolina, western North Carolina, it's pork with a tomato-based sauce. You go to South Carolina, you get pork with a mustard-based sauce. It's all taste and preferences. Expectations about the future. If you expect an increase in income, there'll be an increase in demand. You expect higher prices, you'll increase your current demand. For example, if I tell you the price of gasoline is going to go up 50 cents tomorrow, you're going to do everything you can to get gas today. If I tell you that the price of gas is going down tomorrow, you'll do everything in your power to hold off the purchase of gasoline until tomorrow. So if your expectations of the futures, if you expect it to get cheaper, you'll wait, which would be a decrease in demand, current demand. If you expect it to be going up, that means your current demand will increase. Here's a slide that I think you need to print out. It talks about what the shifters are, the determinants. All of them state they shift the demand curve. If the price of the good itself moves, let's say the graph is for peanut butter or Jif peanut butter. If I lower the price of Jif peanut butter, it is not a movement of the demand curve. It's movement along the demand curve. And we'll see that in just a little bit later. All of these others are movement of the curve. The price change itself is movement along the curve. The price of iPods fall, or you can buy more or less. The price of music downloads falls. What will happen to music downloads? This will show you what I was just talking about, because we're looking at the price of the product we're measuring. And the price of music CDs falls. The first one, iPods prices are going down. What happens to music downloads? They are complementary products. So when the price of the iPods go down, you're going to buy more music downloads, increase in demand. Here's the price of music downloads and the quantity of music downloads. All we're going to see here, there's no movement of the demand curve. All you'll see is a shift along the demand curve from this point to this point, signifying the reduction in price. The quantity will go up and the price will go down. It has nothing to do with movement up, it's movement along. Now on the last one, music CDs, music downloads are substitutes. A fall in the price of music CDs shifts demand to music downloads to the left. I don't think it's as big an issue as it was in the past. The strength of the CD market is diminishing. But right now, there's still some people running CDs in automobiles. When we look at supply, we have the quantity supply, the amount of the good and the sellers are willing to pay at a given price. All things being equal, when the price of goods rise, the quantity will increase. When the price falls, the quantity will fall. Here's a supply schedule. It's showing what Starbucks is willing to do as far as pricing and delivery of goods. At a price of 0, they don't deliver anything. At $1, it's 3, 2 is 6, etc., all the way up to 6 and 18. If we show this graphically, we can see that this is a linear curve with a positive slope, which makes sense. The more you're willing to pay, the more of the product they will deliver to you. Okay? The market supply is some of supplies that all sellers are willing to buy at a given price. The market supply curve is the sum of individual curves horizontally. All we have to do is just add up the quantity supply for all the individual firms. Here they just show Starbucks and Peet's. We know there's more suppliers of lattes in Johnson County, but for simplification, they're just looking at 2. And just like we did with the market demand, going from individual to market, we just add the numbers up. And then when we graph it, we can graph it based on market quantity. We still have a positively sloped supply curve. And the more you're willing to pay, the more the companies are willing to give you. Let's talk about the shifters. They're going to show how price affects quantity supplied and other things being equal. And there are some non-price determinants and changes in the shift of the supply curve. Input prices. First thing you need to ask yourself when you see a problem and they want you to move or determine which curve needs to move, ask yourself, are they asking this question of me as a consumer or me as a business? If it's talking about something a business would do, it's supply. If it's talking about what you as a consumer would do, it's demand. With input prices, just think as a business person, if the cost of your goods or components go up in price, you're not going to be willing to sell the same product at the same price you were yesterday. You now are only willing to sell at a higher price, or you give away less quantity. In that case, the supply curve would shift to the left. If there was a decrease in the price of inputs, let's say you make Hershey Kisses and the price of sugar goes down, you may shift the curve to the right. You're now willing to give more product for the same price. This is for input pricing. Suppose the price of milk falls. I don't know what they're making here, but evidently it requires milk, and that will be an outward shift on the supply curve. Technology. When we see advances in technology, it's intended to reduce the cost of producing the goods. If it truly does, you will see the supply curve shift to the right. If the technology is broken or not effective or not available at the moment, and you had to go back to the old means of producing the goods, your supply curve will shift to the left until you get that technology back online. The number of sellers, very simple. If I decide to build a hot dog stand in Four Oaks, North Carolina, That's going to increase the supply of hot dogs in Four Oaks, North Carolina. If for some strange reason my opponent's hot dog stand were to burn down in the middle of the night, the supply of hot dogs will go down in Four Oaks. Very simple. Now, what you also have to include, when we look at the number of sellers, we've got to look at the size of the firm as well. Let's say we go back to the hot dogs. If I expand my cooking area to cook double my output, that's going to increase the number of hot dogs in Four Oaks. If I shut down half of my cooking facilities, you'll see a decrease in this supply. So it's size and number of sellers kind of work together. If you're a business and you expect the price of your product to go up tomorrow, you're going to hold back your product until you can get to the highest prices. If you think the price is going down tomorrow, you're going to push your product out to the marketplace in hopes of selling it at the higher price that exists today. We do it as consumers when we have expectations of futures as consumers of goods. The businesses do it as well. Here's the same chart we saw before. Price of goods itself. If they just change the price of the good, it is movement up but not along. The rest of these are shifters of the supply curve. They want us to draw a supply curve for a tax return preparation software. What happens to it in each of the following scenarios? Retailers cut the price of the software. That'll identify what we talked about earlier. The technological advance allows the software to be produced at lower cost. We know that's a shifter of supply. We know it's producing at a lower cost, so that curve is going to move to the right. Professional tax return preparers raise the price of the services they provide. That's a trick one. We'll see that in a minute. Here we see the price of tax software, the quantity of tax return software. Here we see the price and quantity of the product currently in the market. If we decide to reduce the price, now we just have a movement along the supply curve down. And when you look at movements on the supply curve, if they move downward, so does P and Q. If it moves up, we'll see increases in P and Q. The second one, clearly an increase in supply with the advancement in technology. The last one was a trick question. It's a demand curve shift. The demand curve for tax preparation software is not a supply curve, it's a demand curve. Here we're looking at the equilibrium price. If we put those two curves together, the supply and demand, we find the equilibrium, which is the point where it's the happy place, where the seller believes they can sell all they produce at that price and quantity, and the consumer believes they can get all they want at that price and quantity. So everybody is happy. Now, if we have movements along these curves, say the supply curve moved outward and the demand curve, we saw movement along, we would define a new equilibrium. The equilibrium price is where quantity supplied is equal to quantity demand. Price gouging. Price gouging is talked about as a negative thing, but as an individual that's been through some pretty difficult weather events, very difficult weather events, gouging brought us goods and services. If there weren't people out there willing to pay that higher price, nobody would have brought us the product. Now, could we be mad at them later? Yes. But if you need a generator and you've been without one for 10 days, you're willing to pay that price. And most of the economists agree with that sentiment. They disagree that Connecticut should pass that gouging law. Surplus. If the price exceeds the equilibrium price, there's a law called law of short side domination. The first curve intercepted by the price level will dominate. In this case, it intercepts the demand curve first, and the demand curve is representing what you will be willing to pay. And if they produce it at $5, you're telling the market, I will only buy 9. Now the business is willing to produce 25 units, but you only want 9. That means there's going to be a surplus of goods. And the only way that they're going to get rid of them is to lower the price, because there's a surplus of goods. In the invisible hand, if there's no legislative or regulatory forces involved, the invisible hand will force that price back to equilibrium. If the price is low, we have a shortage of goods. And we can see that the first curve intercepted by the price level is supply. The businesses aren't willing to sell but 5 products at that price. Now, the consumers want 21, but they're not going to get them because the sellers are steadfast. That's what they're willing to do. Now we have a situation where there's a shortage of goods, and the only way to deal with that is let the consumers bid for them. If there's a shortage of goods, the consumers can fight it out among themselves, and the price will eventually move upward. As long as there's no regulatory forces or social forces involved, the invisible handshake or the invisible foot, the price will work itself back to equilibrium. The 3 steps analyzing changes in equilibrium. Decide whether the event shifts the supply curve, the demand curve, or in some cases both. Decide whether the curve shifts to the right or to the left, and use a supply and demand diagram. Compare the initial and new equilibriums and the effects of price and quantity. If we have movement of either curve, there's our equilibrium, the event to be analyzed, increase in the price of gasoline. In this case, the demand for gasoline if the price goes up on gasoline, the demand for hybrid cars goes to the right. That means the price goes up and the quantity demanded goes up as well. A change in supply, a change in quantity supplied. Change in demand and the change in quantity demand occurs when P changes. New technology reduces the cost of producing the hybrid car. So now the new technology is the supply shifter. So we're going to see the supply curve shift outward. The price of the hybrid car will go down, and the quantity they're willing to produce will go up. There's movement along this curve, but there's movement of the supply curve. You got to remember the difference. movement of the supply curve and movement along the demand curve. They will try to trick you when you get to the test. If the price of gas rises and new technology reduces production costs, we can see both curves shift. Now we had the demand shift, and on the price of gasoline going up, we had the supply shift with the new technologies. So with the supply shift, instead of seeing, well, the demand shift, seeing this is the new equilibrium, we now bring the equilibrium down a little bit. The price increase is not quite as high. However, we do see a large shift in the quantity of the products demanded. In this case, they show the price of gasoline rises and new technology. Here they're showing a bigger supply shift than the demand shift. In that case, the price actually comes down and the quantity goes up. These are somewhat abstract. We don't have any numbers on these. So it's kind of subjective which one moves the greatest and which one moves the least. We see they want us to look at all these: a fall in the price of music CDs, seller of music downloads, negotiated reduction in royalties in West each song, and A and B occur. Fall in the price of CDs, you'll see a decrease in demand for music downloads. A decrease in royalties, you'll see an increase in the supply because they're willing to produce more at a lower cost. And both curves move. Did they show us that? If they'd have showed us both of them, when they showed the supply, the demand went down, and then they showed the supply goes up. What would happen if the demand were to go down? We would now have a new equilibrium somewhere in here, with that demand curve shifting downward if we had both of them. Here are the answers, kind of a summary of the chapter. There's 4 pages of them. I would recommend that you print them all. And that's the end of chapter 4. I also have a video available for chapter 5 for the classes that I will miss on Wednesday and Thursday. Feel free to go and visit those. If you are in my seated classes, there will be videos that will be shown during the class period. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I will have limited mobility after Wednesday and the surgery, but I will try to get back with you. I'll take my tablet home so I can read it while I'm laid out in bed. Have a good week 4. Goodbye.